Scott, when you think about what OEMs should be focusing on in the next couple of years, how can OEMs really optimize their charging experience apart from increasing the charger availability?
That's a really great question. Some things that we're seeing preliminarily within our data is that there are ways that we can make this experience easier for the vehicle owner. Some initial differentiators are optimizing of driver's route based on the current charge level and charger availability in the nearby area. Customers looking for things like a prompt to come up on their vehicle saying, you're getting low on charge. Here's a nearby charger that is available, up and running, that you can get to, and optimizing a route to that charger. So really just taking the anxiety of having to think, where am I going to charge my vehicle, out of the equation, and automating that process for them, giving them that recommendation on where to go.
Hi, Scott. So excited to be talking to you about EV today. My name is Angie. I lead the global auto industry along with Scott. I'll just pass it on to Scott for a short introduction as well.
Yes, my name is Scott, global auto lead here at NPS Prism.
To start us off, Scott, my first question is how large is the EV market in the US? And are we seeing any increase of consumer interest over time?
Yes, really good question. In terms of new vehicle sales, most figures that we see are putting us at less than 10% of total sales. That said, unit sales have been ticking up over time. This continues to fluctuate in growth due to a number of factors, but when we look at our data, to get to your second question, we're seeing increased consumer interest over time. We look at current vehicle owners who are in the short term looking for a new vehicle. And what we're seeing is that among these owners, interest has really remained stable going back all the way to 2021. The general interest in EV has been hovering around 50%, so quite high relative to what we anticipated going into diving into this data. One interesting thing here is that there doesn't appear to be much variation by vehicle class like we would hypothesize. We see that sedans and SUVs are both at about the same level of interest in switching to an electric vehicle, or at least would be willing to switch to consider an electric vehicle. Truck owners started a little bit lower and have been ticking up over time and have now caught up to those sedan and SUV owners, though. Now, of course, these trends do vary by current brand ownership. But if we go a level deeper, we find that's actually mass market owners that have been relatively stable historically. If we separate out mass and luxury, we see that luxury owners do have a higher interest in potentially adopting an electric vehicle as their next vehicle, and that has been ticking up over time.
Got it. That's super interesting. And Scott, you mentioned 50%. So that's 50% of the customers who are going to be switching to another vehicle. And within those, they're considering EV to be their option set. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Got it. And that is interesting that I feel like a couple years ago when we were starting this up, like in 2021, Scott, we were expecting and hearing from our OEM partners that EV sales are going to surge higher much faster, but it doesn't seem to be true yet. So that is interesting to see in our data too.
Absolutely.
So when we look at the customers who are interested in buying EV, what are some of the main reasons for considering EV as their next vehicle?
Yeah, really great question. Across both mass and luxury brand owners who are current owners and are considering an electric vehicle, there are really two clear reasons that we see in our data that people would at least consider an EV for their next vehicle. The first is fuel cost per mile. So the general cost of what we think about in this new era as refueling an electric vehicle. And second of all, the general environmental friendliness of the vehicle itself. And these two reasons both stand out above all other stated reasons, again, across both mass and luxury owners. Rounding out these top three reasons, this is where we start to see a little bit of divergence in some small differences between mass and luxury owners. Mass market owners are more often mentioning things like vehicle maintenance. This is one that spikes above luxury owners, so a cost consideration for current mass owners. Luxury owners, on the other hand, are a little bit more concerned about or interested in the vehicle performance. So some of this enhanced performance, the instant torque that we're seeing, things like that within the electric vehicle space. Now, that said, these third reasons for both mass and luxury are still far below the fuel economy and general environmental friendliness concerns.
That makes sense to me that the fuel economy and the general environmental friendly, like that the consciousness matter more than the others. What about the customers who are not considering EV at all? What are the top reasons people are saying that I'm not ready to consider EV yet?
We see the exact same reasons across both mass and luxury in terms of top three reasons to not consider an EV, and they really aren't even close compared to the other reasons that we track. These are really all components of things that we typically think about as range anxiety. So these are entailing the network availability of recharging stations, the driving range of a fully charged battery within the electric vehicle itself, and then also the time it takes to recharge that battery. So, like I mentioned, these are all things that we hear about in the media as range anxiety. What's really interesting is that neither mass nor luxury owners are really concerned with the maturity, the general maturity of EV technology. So this is not something that they're distrusting in the vehicle itself. They're not really distrustful of the capabilities of the vehicle and the technology. They're more worried about really rethinking how they have to go about this new refueling process that's so separate from filling up at a gas station with a traditional ICE vehicle. This is also something that I would love to look at in the near future as we've arrived at more plug-in standardization. We have more stations that have rolled out, more developed infrastructure countrywide. That'll hopefully relieve some of the concern about charging availability and speed and having to worry less about what percentage is my battery at as I go throughout my day.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, I'm not an EV driver, but it makes sense that the network availability, the driving range, and the charging time, like the essentials of being able to drive, are the factors that matter the most. And it is also interesting that people are more trusting of the vehicle, and that's not the reason why people are not considering EV. And I know you mentioned earlier that the mass and the luxury market customers have slightly different tendency of wanting to buy EV. Do you see any differences on their view on the potential EV purchase?
Yeah, this is a really big differentiating factor we see for reasons that someone would not want to adopt a EV. And this really comes down to purchasing price. This is a concern that really spikes within the mass market owners almost at the same level that we're seeing for those top three reasons that are all related to range anxiety. It's really that purchasing price that luxury owners simply aren't as concerned about, kind of naturally as part of that market segment.
That makes sense. So it will also be interesting if the EV price is able to come down in the future, how that dynamic also comes into play with the mass and the luxury market customers as well. So something to watch out for. Scott, could you tell me more about the charging episode for customers? I know their customers are able to charge at home, but also on the road. Do we see any differences there, or do we see that as a same episode? Like, what are we seeing in our Prism data?
Great question. We've recently begun tracking charging as two discrete episodes in our data. We think about these as very, very different experiences based on past data that we have collecting. So we're really looking at them separately. And this is encompassing charging at home separately from charging on road. And with our initial look across all EV and also inclusive of plug-in hybrid electric vehicle owners, what we're seeing is that charging at home is a promoter creating up. So with a lot of upside for creating promoters of the brand itself and the vehicle. Charging on road, on the other hand, is a more polarizing experience that we talk about as a moment of truth. So there is downside to creating detractors if this is a frustrating experience for the owner. But it also has a lot of upside. If this is something that is easy to do and generally creates a positive experience, we're going to create more promoters out of our owners of these vehicles. We're also generally seeing that episode NPS scores are trending higher for at-home charging. At a glance, this kind of makes sense, right? Charging at home is a less time-sensitive event. There's less stress related to it. Most owners plug their vehicle in overnight if they have an at-home charger, wake up in the morning and their car is ready to go. If you're on the road, again, this is really time-sensitive. You're worried about getting to your next location on time. You're concerned about how long it's taking, whether there's a charger available. You might get there and all the charging spots are taken up, so you'd have to move on somewhere else to find one that's available for you to use.
That makes a lot of sense. Like the anxiety around not knowing if you're going to be able to find a spot, even if you like saw on the app, but versus knowing that at home, you know the charger's there and you know how long it's going to take and you know it'll be charged the next morning. So that makes sense.
Exactly. And I think this is also a particular concern within urban areas where everyone might not have access to an at-home charger. So these public infrastructure chargers are going to be leveraged at a much higher rate than we might see outside of urban centers.
And Scott, when you think about what OEMs should be focusing on in the next couple of years, How can OEMs really optimize their charging experience apart from increasing the charger availability?
That's a really great question. Some things that we're seeing preliminarily within our data is that there are ways that we can make this experience easier for the vehicle owner. Some initial differentiators are optimizing of driver's route based on the current charge level and charger availability in the nearby area. Customers looking for things like a prompt to come up on their vehicle saying, you're getting low on charge. Here's a nearby charger that is available up and running that you can get to, and optimizing a route to that charger. So really just taking the anxiety of having to think, where am I going to charge my vehicle out of the equation and automating that process for them, giving them that recommendation on where to go.
Got it. That's also interesting, Scott, given that in auto, a lot we see is less about, I mean, the technical parts matter, but also it's about the communication and being proactive and being timely. So we also see that for charging as well. So that's awesome. Another thing that we've been hearing a lot, Scott, from our clients is the importance of digital channels. Of course, with like the surge of EV, importance of EV, digital experience is going to be even more become more and more important. So I just wanted to understand on your what your thought was. How do digital channels play into the overall customer experience and satisfaction in the auto industry?
Absolutely. We certainly see within our data that digital infrastructure is becoming more and more important, even beyond the EV space, which is what we've been talking about. ICE owners are also really expecting more and better digital experiences throughout their ownership journey. And especially as the market continues to evolve, we see new in-vehicle technologies rolling out, new capabilities. Owners are really just expecting more and more out of their vehicles and their experiences as an owner of those vehicles. Some of the things that we think about in terms of this are inclusive of things like the vehicle app, the owner website. In our data, we're really seeing that these channels, thinking about them more traditionally as channels, but really as experiences in relation to their vehicle and their ownership experience. These are things that we're seeing really increase in adoption and usage over time, especially in newer model year owners that really have more and more advanced technologies available to them.
That makes sense. And do we see customer expectations also changing for the digital experience?
Absolutely. When we think about something like the app, for example, owners are really looking for things beyond the basic functionality of just interacting with your vehicle. That we know, just starting off, it has to be a couple of things. It has to be robust, it has to be quick, and it has to be reliable. And we also know that owners are going to things such as the app for even more than just interacting with their vehicle. They're really going to these things as a knowledge resource. So, for example, we see that owners really industry wide that have these app infrastructures available to them, they're going there for things related to service. They're going there to both schedule service, look at what service has been performed with their vehicle in the past, and also looking up what their future maintenance schedule looks like. Some other things that certain OEMs are rolling out is providing updates through the app while they're in the shop. So this is a means of communication between the dealership or between the manufacturer and the owner themselves that really elevates that customer experience and creates a recurring touch point to the customer. We also see owners going to the app and other digital resources for things like diagnosing vehicle problems, looking up recall information when those happen, um, looking for guidance on service options when they do need service, and also really just learning about setting up their vehicles, learning about the capabilities of their vehicles. It's much more interactive for a customer to see something moving, something animated, something that can walk them through step by step how to use their functionality within their vehicle, how to perform basic operations rather than doing something like reading a paper manual that is more static and not necessarily searchable or interactive. The other things that we see customers doing is when they're going into these resources, a lot of times we have something like a chat functionality built into it. So that provides a customer a very quick, accessible point of contact to the manufacturer or even to a contact center if they want to call in and speak to a person. It's very quick to get in contact with the manufacturer or centralized knowledge space for these owners through these channels.
As we look at how customers are behaving over time, starting when we started collecting data in 2021, I think there is an increase of the need to use online digital channels as like a one-stop place for not only, as you mentioned, like the service, but also like diagnosing self-resolving problems, to like the again like to your point about EV, understanding about the charging capabilities. So that's interesting to hear that it's not just on EV, but also the ICE vehicle, that the digital experience is becoming more and more important. Does like app and web are going to continue to become important sources for this vehicle owners. And my last question for you, Scott, we talked a lot about what customers are expecting, what charging experience looks like. I wanted to get your sense of like what EV manufacturers are winning and why. I think that would be my last question for you.
Absolutely. Talking broadly in this digital space, we see a few brands doing really well, such as Tesla, Cadillac, and BMW. General idea here is they're really pushing their owners to use this digital infrastructure for more than just locking their doors, checking their oil and gas levels. They're really trying to unify the owner experience into this centralized space that's interactive, easily accessible, searchable, ready at a moment's notice. And it also gives the manufacturer the benefit of past the shopping experience, passing the once or twice a year service event. It gives a recurring touch point with the owner so they can continue to build that relationship with their owner.
I love that. It's also super interesting that Tesla, Cadillac, BMW, those who have really good relationship NPS scores, are also able to deliver those digital experiences, as you mentioned. So, would be interesting to see if there are any other players in the future who are able to deliver that digital infrastructure that those three OEMs are delivering, and seeing if their relationship NPS overall increase over time as well. Well, Scott, thank you so much for your time. This was really, really informative and always fun to talk to you about auto in general, Scott. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angie. Great catching up on this.